Hi, everybody. Welcome to Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick. And shout out to all you gearhead freaks listening from places like Attleboro, Massachusetts, Canton, Georgia, Corpus Christi, Texas, Pasadena, California, King City, Ontario, Canada, Athens, Greece, and Mandurah, Australia. Smash that follow button, leave me 5 stars and a quick review, and if you're feeling generous, you can further show your appreciation at buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage, and you can contribute as little as $2, which is a pretty good deal. That's less than you'd pay for those little felt pads they sell at the auto parts store. You know, the ones you put on your battery terminals? I don't even know if those things work. I always use Coca-Cola myself. All right, well, we're going to get right to it today, and my guest is Brad Brownell. He's a prolific automotive writer and one of the co-founders of RADwood, which is a multi-city car gathering dedicated to the machines of the 80s and 90s. And their next event is coming to Los Angeles this weekend. So break out your parachute pants and your Oakley blades, and I'll be back right after this. This episode of Horsepower Heritage is sponsored by Model Citizen Diecast. Maybe you can't afford that Shelby 289 Cobra or that Porsche 356 Speedster, but having a scale model on the shelf is easy with Model Citizen Diecast. They stock collector-grade scale models in 1/43rd scale, 1/18th scale, and even the massive 1/8th scale masterpieces from the Amalgam Collection. And if you use the promo code HERITAGE at checkout, they'll give you 10% off your order. Limitations apply. Just visit ModelCitizenDiecast.com and check out their great selection. From race cars to classic cars and everything in between. Model Citizen Diecast, because your inner child still wants to play with cars. Brad Brownell, you are a busy bee. You're the co-founder of RADwood. You write for Jalopnik and Auto Week, among others. You also write for the website flat6s.com. And you have a new venture, which is centered on electric vehicles, and that's called Autopia 2099, and that's coming to Los Angeles December 4th. So, Brad, first question, how do you keep all of this straight?
That's a good question. I have been basically nonstop moving all year. It's been fun and interesting. I think that I have like a thing in my head that's like, as soon as one thing is over, you have to have the next thing already started, because if you look forward to something and then you get there, and then it's over, then you get into like this depression afterward where you have nothing to look forward to. So I have to just create things for me to look forward to.
Oh, yeah. I know that feeling of that letdown after a party or a vacation or whatever. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. You just kind of like you come down off that high and you need your next fix.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, I just try and keep as busy as I can and always have something to look forward to.
Well, and let me ask you this. So the pandemic obviously put the brakes on all of this stuff, but it also gave you time to kind of sit back, do some planning, do some more brainstorming, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I last year threw myself into my work. I did more writing than I've ever done, and I did more like road trips and stuff. And that was actually when I came up with Autopia. I was riding a motorcycle across the country, and I had all those hours to myself to just be lost in thought. And somewhere about Montana, I went, I should do an electric car show. So then I had a few days to think about it. And then a couple months later, I put together a team and we brainstormed and came up with the idea.
Well, it's pretty crazy to think that not that long ago, the only options were like an EV1 or a Honda Insight.
Yeah.
And now we're into the performance era of EVs.
Yep.
Which is very exciting. And yet, true car guys at heart, they want internal combustion, right? So,
oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I actually just went to a show. It was Holly's High Voltage Festival that was last weekend in NorCal. And it was interesting seeing, because it was a lot of the traditional hot rodders have taken to EVs because it's a way for them to go fast. They don't really care how they get there. They just want to go fast. So if your goal is to run 9s in the quarter mile, you can do that. If your goal is to go 360 miles an hour at Bonneville, you can do that. So I think there's definitely some crossover there where the traditional gas hot rodders are getting into EVs, and the EV guys are realizing that they can go fast now too. So there's a little bit of a combo there. But yeah, I mean, we're always going to have a place for internal combustion. You know, I just went and picked up a 91 NSX from Acura that they loaned me for the week. So I'm very grateful for that. And just driving that 10 minutes between American Honda and where I am now in El Segundo, it was like, oh man, this is what cars used to be like. This is so fun.
Yeah, totally. And it is a big tent. I mean, there's a place for hybrids and full EVs, and like you say, the ICE engine is going to be with us for a while. Now, you have an interesting project that I want to talk about later, but I'll just tease it right now, which is that you've got a Porsche Boxster that you are hybridizing with an electric motor for the front wheels, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Well, let's leave that on the table for now, because it's a fascinating project. And one of the cool things about the project is that you're pretty much going 100% Porsche other than the electric motor.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So we're going to jump back to that, but let's talk about RADwood. So right now in LA, you're prepping for the show, which is November 20th. And tickets are available on the RADwood site, right? Which is radwood.com.
That's correct.
I'm going to be at the show. I can't wait to see you.
Awesome.
And all those cars. And what about the origins of RADwood for the uninitiated? This is a show that's dedicated to the cars of the 80s and 90s, right?
Yeah. It came about because our small group of friends, we kind of grew up in the era where that was all we could afford. And it was still modern enough, with fuel injection and stuff, that it was reliable, that we could daily drive them all the time. But they're still simple enough that we can do all the work ourselves. And they're still analog enough that they're really fun to drive. So it was kind of like the trifecta of things came together for that era to be the one that we fell in love with. So 4 of us, we met up at Monterey Car Week. This would have been 2016. And we were all sitting around talking, and somebody said, if you could do a show like at Monterey Car Week or whatever, what kind of show would you want to do? And the answer was like kind of a Goodwood style festival. We wanted to have it be big and bold and everything from the era that we love, because my first enthusiast car was a Triumph TR7, and that car tried to kill me a few times. But the first one that I actually fell in love with was an 83 944, Porsche 944. And I remember taking it to like PCA Concours events and being turned away. Like they were like, "Oh, are you sure you want to pay the entry fee to get in here with this, clunky bucket of a car?" And they didn't want it there, and they wanted to make sure that I knew they didn't want it there. So there was really no place for that era of car for people to appreciate. It was basically cars died in 1973, and there were no cool cars until like supercars of the 2000s.
And the other thing too was that you're talking about a period probably when those RADwood cars, that Rad-Era, they were at the bottom of their depreciation curve. They'd maybe been through 2 to 3 owners.
Sure.
And they were just in that lull where nobody cares, right?
Yep. So like a year and a half after that first discussion, we finally had our first show. We got a taco truck, and we printed up some t-shirts, and we rented a marina in NorCal. We expected, 30 or 40 cars, and we got like 130 cars. So that was when we kind of knew that there was something going on there. And someone saw some coverage from the event and reached out and asked when our next car show was going to be. So we were like, well, how about in December? So we had another show that same year in Southern California, in the LA area. And we had, we booked the place. It was full. So we had a real success on our hands, and we started planning for 2018. And I think we did 9 shows in 2018.
Yeah. RADwood came out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very fast. It was fast for us too. It was totally like we had no idea what we were doing, and then all of a sudden we were doing it. So it was very fun and very interesting, and I'm glad that it turned out the way it did.
Oh, it's a phenomenon. And by the way, where did you guys come up with the name?
It's a play on Goodwood.
Oh, okay. Why did I not know that immediately? Duh.
Yeah, it's like the Goodwood revival, because they have the
Right.
revival is everything through 63, and people dress in period, and they come out, and they have a more motorsport aspect to it, but they have a lot of period correct aesthetic and all that. So we wanted to do something. We felt that not only was this the era that we loved, but we also felt it was a very American era. We saw the 60s as being a very British era. They were exporting culture, and we were importing it. Beatles, British Invasion, Mini Coopers, the whole nine. Yeah. So we felt like the 80s and 90s was a very American era. It was when cinema was at its height. We were exporting culture at a phenomenal rate. Our cars were the ones that were exciting all over the world and all that. So,
Well, the other thing too is that's interesting about the culture is sort of the Pacific Rim melding of Japanese culture, pop
mhm,
culture, and American
mhm,
pop culture, anime, Robotech,
absolutely.
all that stuff kind of went into a stew,
Hmm.
and out came some really cool cars and a lot of obviously collaborations between American manufacturers and Japanese manufacturers.
Right.
The Americans needed their corporate average fuel economy to come down, and the Japanese wanted to sell their cars here.
Yeah.
And then you get into all of the Japanese manufacturers building plants here, which
Hmm.
changed everything.
For sure. It was an interesting time in the automotive industry, and it was an interesting time in culture in the world. So, everything was brash and bright colors and opulent and over the top. So, we wanted Radwood to be kind of an explosion of that culture all in your face all at once. So, we know that it's a little tongue in cheek and it's a little bit over the top, and maybe the 80s and 90s weren't exactly like that, but it's kind of an homage to what it was, what it feels like it was then now.
Oh, absolutely. And nostalgia is never, historically accurate
Right.
necessarily.
Right.
But now, like Goodwood, where people dress in period costume, did people begin to come to Radwood immediately in their members only jackets and their acid wash jeans?
We encouraged it from the very first show. I would say it has steadily been around 30 to 50% of every show people dress up. So we definitely still encourage it. We do offer an award for raddest dressed. And, we've had walk-off fashion competitions at each show, and we have, clap contests for people to pick who they think their winner should be and all that kind of stuff. So we make it a very crowd favorite kind of event.
Nice.
So yeah, yeah, it's always been a part of the show. We would like to see it get to 100%. We want everybody to dress up.
Well, I've got to crawl into the back of the closet and see if I can unearth some of my old clothes. And I think I might even have like a goodie comb somewhere in a drawer to throw in my back pocket. So
Nice. There you go.
yeah. Well, and I'll just tell you, I'm smack dab in the era, man.
There you go. That's the great thing about the show is there are people who were born in the 2000s that love the nostalgia of it. There are people that were born in the era, like myself. I was born in '87. Um, that don't remember the 80s at all, but I remember a lot of the 90s. And then there were people that were in their adulthood in the 80s that still remember it. So we have a huge span from 15-year-olds to 70-year-olds that come to our shows that really enjoy it. So it spans all generations.
You know what's funny to me, Brad, is that going to Radwood and having lived through the era, it's very bizarre to have that nostalgic atmosphere for something that you experienced firsthand. It's weird.
Sure. Well, I will say, as a millennial, our entire existence has been nostalgia because it feels like for maybe it's the nihilist in me, but it feels like every year is getting worse. So every year you look at the year that you just went through and you're like, man, it was so much nicer in 2020, or it was so much nicer in 2018 or whatever. So maybe that's less true this year than last year, but it's always been a nostalgia. And we saw things progress at such a massive rate in tech and in access to the internet and knowledge and all these things. We saw that progress at such a rapid pace that I remember a time before the internet, but now my entire life is the internet.
Well, I was just going to say, you guys have the benefit of coming up in an era when videotape proliferated and then we went to digital. And so much more stuff was captured,
Yeah.
And archived.
Right.
And now you've got a treasure trove on YouTube to
Right.
dive into, right? So
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
earlier generations didn't have that luxury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can look up pretty much anything I want and I can go see it pretty much immediately.
I know it's crazy, right? Like you can pull up an original commercial for a Toyota MR2 on YouTube
Yeah.
if you.
Yeah.
What can we expect at Radwood in LA this weekend?
We can expect a lot. It's going to be our biggest show since before the pandemic. We have already sold over 500 tickets. We're expecting around 600 cars, and that'll be like capped at 600. It probably could go a little higher, but that's the room that we have. There will be displays from friends at Motul. There will be displays from Acura and Honda. The new Integra will be there with a lineup of Integras from the past. So you'll be able to make that connection between the RADwood era and today. We have a really awesome t-shirt that we would love to sell to everybody who comes to the show. So yeah, I'm super jazzed on it. It's going to be an awesome time. We have so many cool cars coming.
And by the way, let me just paint the picture for people who haven't been. So the show's curated. It's not just a bunch of cars parked in a lot. There's typically music.
Yes.
And you're going to have food trucks.
Yes, there will be food trucks.
And so it's an immersive experience.
Yes. Yeah. There's the RADwood royalty area, which is kind of reserved for extremely clean examples and extremely rare examples of 80s and 90s cars. And then there's the standard display, which is non-discriminatory. We kind of like to be welcoming of anybody from the era. So whether your car is in the middle of a restoration, or it's been your daily driver for 30 years, or it's your pride and joy, we want you to bring it. We want a full smattering of everything from the 80s and 90s, whether it's, an original unrestored Camry or
Chrysler K car.
Yeah, Chrysler K car, exactly.
Dodge Colt.
Absolutely. And we've seen stuff like that. We've had somebody that restored like a Mark II Rabbit. It wasn't a GTI or anything. It was just a standard, regular, everyday, run-of-the-mill Rabbit. And it was like showroom fresh. It was amazing. And to see like some of those more quote-unquote standard cars that you don't necessarily see anymore, it's really cool to kind of feel like you're back in the parking lot at the local mall.
Yeah, you're going to the Sherman Oaks Gallery to see a movie.
Right. If you're not well-versed and enthusiast of the era, you might just think it's an old parking lot. You just traveled back in time. So
I love that because, the daily drivers were the reality, right?
Yeah.
The very expensive high-end performance cars were not the norm.
Right.
And that's true, of course, of any era. So
Right. And while we do have a ton of those, we like to focus our attention on the rare stuff more than the expensive stuff. We've given trophies to like a really nicely done, period correct, lowered Geo Metro convertible on gold wire wheels.
Nice.
So like it was painted like bass boat flake pink, and it had these gold wire wheels, and it was slammed, and it had like a hula girls for a shifter. And it was very like they went all out, and it was very cool to see. So that's the kind of stuff we love to see, is like, your thing or not. That's what we're going to see. Low riders, mini trucks, all that kind of stuff.
My first car was the perfect RADwood car. It was a 1983 Mazda 626 coupe.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, those are great.
Metallic blue, which is, I think, one of the most common colors. Yeah, it was pretty mint when I had it. And at the time, I didn't appreciate it.
Sure.
But one thing that was cool about that car is that all the windows went completely down and it had no B-pillar. So it was a true coupe, pillarless coupe.
Yeah.
And it had a 5-speed. It was comfortable. It was super reliable. But you know what? I just wasn't into it. And I wanted a BMW 2002. And that's what I ended up getting. I sold the Mazda. I got a 2002. But even then, that was totally out of step, right? Because everybody that I went to school with had either a classic Barracuda or a Fox body Mustang or a Ford Probe or something like that. So yeah. I had 2002s before they were cool again, which was kind of an interesting turn of events. But
my first car was a 91 Pontiac Grand Prix SE Coupe. It was a fine car, I guess. I wouldn't say that I miss it, but every once in a while I'll see one come up on eBay and like, I should get another one, maybe.
They had that awesome plastic body cladding along.
Oh yeah. And it had all the buttons on the steering wheel.
That's right.
Before all the buttons on the steering wheel was a normal thing.
And digital instrumentation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yep.
Like that was a direct outgrowth of like Knight Rider.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Know, Tron, all of that stuff.
Yep.
So trendy. So I think we know that you were kind of surprised that it took off as it did. And I think everyone was surprised because there's this perception that younger people weren't interested in cars.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know who Myron Vernus is?
I do. Myron's a good friend of mine. I was texting him earlier today.
I'm glad to hear that. So I had Myron on the show over the summer. And one of the things that Myron said was that when he attended his first RADwood, he was struck by how many young people there were. And it was very encouraging to him to see that the car hobby isn't going to die.
No, nope. It's not. Car hobby is never going to die. I don't think. I think it's just changing. Just because the market value of your Model A has tanked in the last 10 years doesn't necessarily mean that people don't care about cars. They just don't care about the cars that you care about. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for car culture to thrive.
Yeah, it's just a generational shift.
Absolutely. And that seems to happen all the time. I mean, there was a time when, car culture was big fin Cadillacs and, hopped up
Deuce Coupes.
Yeah, Deuce Coupes. So it happens all the time. I'm a Porsche guy, and I've been a Porsche guy for a long time, and I always joke whenever a new 911 comes out, somebody will inevitably say, "Wow, the last great," or the last real Porsche was whatever one they have. And so I always joke that a Porsche is not really a Porsche unless it was built on a dirt floor in a sawmill in Austria, which was only 48 and 49. So those were
right.
So
it all depends on how far back you want to scrutinize. Right?
Exactly.
Look at the popularity of the 996 now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody panned it for so long, but a rising tide lifts all boats.
That's right. When you can't afford a 993, you go get the next best thing. And honestly, I think a 996 is better than a 993 anyway. That's a controversial opinion, but
I can never warm up to the fried egg headlamps, but
you can't see them from behind the steering wheel.
Good point.
That's the best place to be because you don't have to look at them.
And for that matter, I mean, look at the 914. I mean, They were absolutely hated.
Yep.
Practically from the day they came out.
Well, it was Porsche's most successful model when it was sold brand new. So
irony.
Yeah, right. So because it was their least expensive model anyway, they outsold 911s 2-1. But yeah, I mean, for years and years, they were just neglected and kind of thrown away. And I mean, 914s, I may or may not have sawed a few of them in half. So I remember when they were worthless, and it wasn't that long ago.
No, it was recent.
Yeah.
And of course, there's the whole 914 versus 914.6. And of course, there's many, many more 914.6s than they ever built, Yeah,
914.6, they only built like 2,200 of them, and there's probably 10,000 of them now. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Horsepower Heritage will be right back. Don't go away. Horsepower Heritage is teaming up with Valkyrie Racing to support their efforts to combat child trafficking. And with your donation, you can enter to win one of 10 unique digital art pieces of their Polar Porsche 356. Just go to valkyrieracing.com/donate356. And once you make your donation, visit my homepage at horsepowerheritage.com, then click on the contact button and send me your name and the reference number for your donation. You'll be entered to win one of 10 of these terrific art pieces by artist Wade Devers. The entries will be drawn at random on December 20th. And if you miss any of this, don't worry, just look in the show notes for complete instructions. 100% of your donation goes to help victims of child trafficking in 5 countries. And on behalf of Valkyrie Racing, thanks for your support. And now back to my interview with Brad Brownell, right here on Horsepower Heritage. I'm curious what some of the most interesting cars that you have seen around the country that have shown up at RADwood. Are there a couple that, I mean, I know there's so many to choose from, and it might be a little hard to think of one or two right now, but anything that just blew you away, whether it was a car that was super original and untouched, or whether it was something that you hadn't seen for a long time?
Every show, you would think after doing this for so long, we'd be jaded, but literally every show has something that completely blows my mind. None of them, of course, are coming to mind right now, but
of course not, because I put you on the spot.
Right. There at Chicago, there was actually a motorcycle. It was a gorgeous original 83 Katana that was so well done. It had upgraded suspension. It was more like track focused bike, but it was so well done. It was so tastefully done. I had to give that guy Raddest Motorcycle Trophy Award. So that one really blew me away in Chicago. But yeah, I mean, every time we go out to one of these events, we just get like dumbfounded by either the quality or the quantity or the like very regional centric vibe of each show.
It's interesting that you say that because I was actually going to ask you if different genres, let's say, different makes and models are more popular in different parts of the country.
That's absolutely the case. I mean, we had a show in Detroit, and it was very, very Detroit. We saw a lot of the Probes and a lot of the Camaros and Mustangs and that type of stuff. And there was actually a lot of that in Philadelphia as well. A lot of the muscle car, a lot of that type of more blue collar enthusiast car. On the West Coast, we see, BMW is our number one mark at every show. E30s, E30s, some early E36s, Z3s, that kind of stuff. Porsche for a long time was our second biggest mark at our shows. And I think that's because so many of them are still on the road. People cared for them.
Brad, have you seen many mini trucks coming out to the shows? Because the mini truck explosion in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, I mean, they were everywhere. And I just wonder what happened to all of them.
I want to know what happened to them too. I mean, obviously some of them have to still be out there. We've seen a few, but not nearly as many as we had hoped for. There was a mini truck crew that came to Chicago, and they brought maybe 6 or 7 trucks with them. And there was one that was actually on the cover of Mini Truckin' Magazine in period that won our show in LA maybe 3 years ago. So yeah, they're out there, but we would love to see more of them.
That's really cool. Can we just touch on the judging at RADwood events? I mean, it's quite informal compared to, let's say, a traditional concours event. Obviously, it's all about the fun, right? So
yes.
How does that go down?
So all of our awards are organizer's choice. Well, for the most part, they're organizer's choice. We, as the organizers of the event, typically get very little time to walk around and see the cars, but we like to make a point of around noon to 1:00. We will all get together and we'll go walk the field, and we'll kind of make our picks. And then we argue amongst ourselves, usually for half an hour to an hour, while we're doing other things. And then we'll kind of come back at the end, and really our decision is made about 3 minutes before we deliver the trophies to people. So we kind of sometimes right up to the line, we'll have a microphone in our mouth, up to our mouth, and then go, "Are you sure about that? Or you want to make, maybe I can make my case for this other one, real quick." So
well, that's fun.
We definitely don't want to focus too heavily on the awards. We don't want people to try to come to RADwood to win an award with that like specific purpose. We just like to have it be just a fun thing to cap off the event and kind of let people know that it's over. So we have 7 trophies, I believe, for every show: Raddest in Show, Raddest Domestic, Raddest Import, Truck, Motorcycle, Dressed, and Accessory. And usually for Dressed, we'll do a walk-off kind of competition, or we'll do a crowd's choice award or something like that to get people fired up and interested and into the scene.
No, that's fun. And it's a great capper to the day.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of want to shift gears, if you will.
Let's do it.
I hate those puns. I'll cut that out. But so, Brad, let's talk about your own car fascination. And, you said you had that Triumph. Mm-hmm. And I know that you've got like a string of projects. You're a chronic project guy.
Yeah.
So what's in the garage right now?
Okay. So my most recent acquisition is actually the RADwood van. I bought a 2008 Ford E350 ambulance. This is a big diesel van that I drive across the country. I use that for a tow rig. I can haul motorcycles and stuff with it, which is nice. Just before that, I bought a BMW R1200 GS. That's my big dual sport off-road. It's a 96, so it's Rad-Era. I made myself a pact that if I bought a bike, if I bought a new motorcycle, it'd have to be electric, and if I bought a used motorcycle, it had to be Rad-Era. So that was my one that fits in there. Now I need to buy an electric bike. Oh, let's see. Car side, I have a Nissan Leaf that I recently purchased. That's my daily ride. It's a 2011. I got it for $2,000. Fixed it up a little bit, did some custom work to it, and it gets about 45 miles of range, so I can pop around town and run errands and stuff with it. From the enthusiast side, I have a 76 Porsche 912E. I've had that for like 6 years now. I have a 95 Audi S6 sedan, turbo 5-cylinder that I lifted like 16 inches.
Wow.
It's real tall. Off-road tires, the works. It's real big. I have a 83 944 Euro with sunroof delete, red car, guards red. I have a 86 944 Turbo that I share with my buddy Ethan Tufts. That car has like 500,000 miles. Allegedly, the engine's never been apart. Still drives great. It's like one of the most fun things in the world. And then I have a 97 Porsche Boxster that we teased earlier is the hybrid project car.
Well, let's talk about that Boxster project. So you're going to put an electric motor in the front, give it all-wheel drive. Pretty ambitious plan.
Yeah, it's maybe a little over my head, but we're getting there. It's been a slow run. But yeah, I bought a Nissan Leaf motor, and a friend of mine local in Reno, he just powered his DeLorean with a Nissan Leaf motor. And he has this aftermarket motor controller unit that pumps it up from like 160 kilowatts to around 300 kilowatts, which is give or take 400 horsepower.
Nice.
I don't think I need quite that much, but like if I could get from 175-ish horsepower to around 250, that'd be great. But that's going to power the front wheels, and then I'm going to keep the stock 2.5 running the rear wheels. The long-term plan is probably a Tesla motor in the front and a 996 turbo motor in the back. But the idea is to get it stripped down as much as possible so that it actually weighs about what a stock Boxster weighs, even with the extra drivetrain and all the batteries. They started life at around 24-ish hundred pounds, and I'm fairly certain that I've got mine down to about 1,800 right now. So if I could get enough with the roll cage and the batteries and the motor and all that, if I could keep that under like 600 pounds, that would be ideal.
Yeah. So stripped away, and then obviously that makes room for the batteries and the.
Yes. Yeah. So the batteries will actually be where the passenger seat used to be, and it doesn't have a windshield, and it'll have a faired in race car from the 50s kind of look to it with a monoposto seat. So you're just you behind the steering wheel, and then you're faired in the rest of the passenger compartment. So there'll be like a trunk. You open the passenger door, and there'll be a trunk there with batteries. And then the front trunk will obviously be gone because it'll be full of motor. And then the rear trunk is where I'm going to put the radiator and that kind of stuff for the engine. The power steering is going to go to electric. That'll be run in the front trunk. There won't be a power steering belt. Basically, all of the accessories are going away. So there won't be an alternator. There won't be
AC,
obviously. There won't be any power steering running off of the motor, so it'll free up a few horsepower there. And we'll be able to run a DC to DC converter running from the high voltage to a 12 volt to run as the alternator. And because it's got an electric motor, I might pull out first and reverse. So it'll reduce the weight. I mean, it's an inconsequential amount, but we'll start off in electric, and then we'll be able to take off in second gear or whatever. And then reverse, obviously, you won't need to use the gas motor to reverse. You can just flip a switch, turn the electric motor into reverse, and back out of a parking spot or whatever. So yeah, just trying to get it as lightweight as possible, as simple as possible, add a little bit of power and give myself some push to pass kind of button to work with on track and all that.
Maybe I'm not wrapping my head around this, but is there going to be some sort of synergy between the electric motor and the gasoline throttle?
So the gas motor won't know the electric motor is there. It won't care. It'll just think it's like going downhill. The electric motor will be able to kind of tell what's going on with the gas motor. You know, long term, like I said, I wanted to put a 996 turbo motor in there. We'll be able to control when in the throttle electric comes in, because it'll have a sensor that'll read boost and it'll know what the manifold pressure is until there's boost, and then it'll dial back so you're not using as much electricity. And so there's a lot of sensors that will be on the gas motor that the electric motor controller can read and use to determine what it's going to do, and that'll be programmed in at that time. That's kind of above my pay grade. I'll have somebody else helping me with that.
But it'll all your power delivery will be controlled through the throttle.
Through the throttle, yes.
Okay.
Yep. So right now it's a 97 Boxster, so it's still a cable throttle car. So we'll just add basically a potentiometer to that throttle to give a signal for the front motor to figure out what it's doing.
I don't know. It sounds like black magic to me, dude.
It definitely is. It definitely is. But I've always wanted to be able to disconnect those. So drive in full electric, drive in full gas, or both. And I think, for a track car, I'll be able to use the gas motor to charge up the electric motor because I'll be able to recoup. And so I'll be able to do like two out laps essentially where I'm charging up. And then on the third lap, I'll do like a flying lap where I'll have all that extra power to help me. Or I'll be able to push a button to pass somebody coming out of a corner, or, those types of things. So it's all going to be controlled in a very scientific way. And the guy who is helping me with the build, he's like, it's kind of going to be like a Jim Hall chaparral situation where Jim was the only one that could drive the chaparrals because he was the one that engineered them. So once you're familiar with how this thing works, I don't think anyone else is going to be able to do a fast lap time in it. It'll just be you.
Right.
So I'm like, that sounds kind of cool. I like that.
That's pretty awesome. Couple questions.
Sure.
What's your timeline for this? And how the heck do you find time to wrench yourself with everything else you're doing?
So yes, both of those questions are valid. The first one, what's the timeline? I bought the Leaf motor like 2 years ago, and then I had a big hospital bill, and that set me back. And then I had the motor blew in my 912, and that set me back. So like every time I get to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend money on this project, something else happens. We bought a house, it needed a roof. It's definitely like whenever it happens is going to be when it happens. And then how do I find time? Honestly, I haven't done anything on it since this spring. It's just been sitting on my lift because I've been either out of town or completely wiped out when I get home. I was home for 2 days in the last 6 weeks.
Wow.
So yeah, it's hard to find time, but when I do find time, I do enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it's a really ambitious project. I can't wait to see how it turns out. And you know what? The time that you do get to wrench, it's that much sweeter, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. When I have 6 hours of alone time in the garage, I just crank up the music and get some stuff done, usually with a Sawzall, or, I'm cutting pieces out or taking out wiring harnesses or whatever. So yeah, it's usually pretty fun. It's just a matter of time suck right now.
Yeah. Well, all in good time. I'm with you. I've got my own projects, and you just have to juggle them and find the time, even if it's a half an hour at a time,
Right.
So it all adds up.
Yep.
All right. Well, I've got a fun little thing we can do here.
Sure.
So play along. So, all right, let's talk about some Rad-Era cars and your preferences.
Okay.
We're going to play a game of this or that.
I like it.
Number 1, first gen Isuzu Impulse or second gen Volkswagen Scirocco?
Ooh. Is the Scirocco a 16 valve?
Yes.
It is. Okay, then I'll take that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I had a friend in high school who had a Scirocco, and I kind of fell in love with them then. I really love those cars. The Impulse it's a little lighter, it's a little more nimble, but man, those Scirocco's, they're so fun.
They're very cool cars. I myself am going to go with the Impulse only because Giugiaro.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Number 2, 93 Subaru SVX or 93 Toyota Supra twin turbo.
Ooh, I would probably have to go with the Supra. I like the SVX a lot, but it would have to be a manual swap for me to take that.
Okay. I'm going to go with the SVX because although you're 100% on the money regarding manual versus automatic, 3.3 liter flat 6.
Yeah, it does sound really good. And with a stick, it really loves to rev, and they're really fun to drive when you get a manual swap. I've seen I don't know, maybe a half dozen of them with stick swaps. And then every time I see one, I'm like, oh, that'd be a really good car for me.
Plus, I love the styling and I love the split window, even though it's kind of janky.
Yeah, it feels very fighter jet.
Yes, that's exactly.
But the Mark IV Supra, that interior is very fighter jet because you've got the layout kind of curved around the driver. So yeah.
All right, number 3, 95 Mazda MX-6 or 95 Ford Probe.
Oh, I liked the styling of the MX-6 a little better. It always felt a little classier to me. So I think I'm going to go with that.
Me too.
Right.
And it's kind of a trick question because they're basically the same car, yeah. Right?
Basically the same car, yeah.
Yeah, the Probe, I mean, let's not underestimate the Probe. It was a hot seller.
Yeah.
And as Ford styling went at the time, I think it was the most unified, let's say.
The MX-6 had like that longer pulled out deck lid almost, where the Probe was more hatchy. So yeah, I think that's why I like it a little better.
Definitely. I also like the flow of the MX-6's front end much better. It looks, I mean, it's just as plasticky, but somehow it manages to look less plasticky.
Right.
Well, those are my 3. Those are just some of the cars that come to my mind when I'm thinking about the Rad-Era. And I mean, I remember when they were new and how exciting they were. And you guys are making them exciting again.
Oh, thank you. I think that it's always been the enthusiasts that have carried that era forward. The people who were enthusiastic about cars of that era have always been enthusiastic about cars of that era. You know, they bought them new or they bought them secondhand, and they kept them nice for all these years, even though there was nowhere to necessarily display them or whatever. We are just facilitating enthusiasts coming together at a common event. So without the people that cared for these cars, that kept them nice, shined up, and ready to go, there wouldn't be a RADwood.
Brad Brownell, thanks for being with me today. RADwood Los Angeles comes to the Honda campus in Torrance, California, November 20th. Tickets are on sale right now at radwood.com, or you can go to Eventbrite, right?
Yeah, you can search for RADwood on Eventbrite and it should come right up for you.
Awesome. I'll put links in the show notes for all of this, and I will see you there.
I will see you there. I'm so excited about it.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. If you like what you've heard, follow the podcast, leave me 5 stars and a quick review. And if you want to support the show another way, go to buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage. And that's always appreciated. Read articles and watch videos on the website at horsepowerheritage.com. And until next time, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.